But there's one more thing. What if we could get some of the best investors in the world, people who really know ad tech inside and out, to actually invest in these startups that come through the AppNexus Accelerate program? I'd love to announce that today we've got 3 venture partners who've agreed to review and fund the startups that build on top of the AppNexus platform. Tribeca Venture Partners, First Round Capital, and Venrock. And here today to talk about it, Chip Meakem and Chris Fralic. Come on up, guys. All right. So.
Nice socks.
Thank you. I've got sparkly purple socks on.
They match.
They do. They do. So quick introduction. So Chip Meakem, Tribeca Venture Partners, one of the earliest investors in AppNexus. He actually comes from the industry. He was at 24/7 back in the late 90s, an early investor in Massive and Context Web. The only thing I don't like about Chip is he played basketball at Cornell. He probably is better than me too, but we won't talk about that. And Chris Fralic, one of the very first people I talked to when we started AppNexus back in the day. First round's probably the best, most prolific venture investor in the ad tech space. OpenX, Double Verify, Invite Media, AppNexus. I'm sure the list goes on.
Demdex, Flurry, we can go on. I think we have 15 boxes checked in the Luminoscape chart.
That's just showing off.
Sorry.
But I'm not sure if Chris is any good at basketball. So
No.
well, I should give credit where credit is due. The idea for AppNexus Accelerate came from you, Chip. I'd love to hear where that came from.
Sure. Well, you were talking before. I think we go back to the beginning, excuse me, of AppNexus, probably 08, similar conversation. You're definitely not wearing a tux. You probably have your bare feet up on this table while we're talking. But the thesis was pretty simple, right? You had real time was real. It's a sufficiently different paradigm that a new platform was required, and an ecosystem would evolve on that platform, right? And I always joke as an early stage investor, sometimes it actually happens, which is rare. But and here we are. And so that ecosystem is happening. To me, it's a very simple logical extension of that initial partnership with you and the team, right? To now fund that next layer of innovation in the ecosystem. And then I'll make it even simpler. I was joking with you 3 months ago. I sort of looked and said, looks like about half of my ad tech deal flow is somehow built on and or partnered with AppNexus. There's something here, right? And we were doing it informally anyway. So we figured we'd formalize the partnership, and I think it's a great win-win for all of us.
Yeah, Chris, we've been talking about this forever. Go ahead.
Yeah, I like this program because I think it's a win, most importantly for the startups, providing access to an amazing platform and as well as capital and insight. And I think it's a win for innovation for AppNexus, and this is what Chip and I and the Venrock team do for a living. We invest in companies, and we'll get good deal flow and get to see some great companies to come out of it. I think you made a point earlier about how access to integration and getting contracts signed it's a bigger deal than people can imagine. A lot of enterprise value for startups is based on how many important platforms are you connected with. And we've got some well-funded, well-known portfolio companies that have had to come through me to try and get prioritized to get on AppNexus to show you how important it is. And so it's a real benefit to these startups to have a program to plug right in.
And I think you think that it helps when you call me. It does, actually. So you guys see probably more ad tech deal flow than anybody else. So what do you think it means? I have this thesis that the agile ad tech startup will dramatically change how these companies approach funding, approach their early stages, and approach innovation. What do you think?
Well, I think you said it before. If you use consumer internet or social as a proxy, right? A cloud infrastructure evolved there and dramatically changed the cost of entry for any given product or service, right? So you took we have a seed investment in any content anywhere. I won't go into the details. Not that many years ago, this would have required $30 million of upfront capital to even begin the project. Today, we're going to launch a fully featured product, commercial upgrade for $1 million, right? And yes, there will be significant capital expense, but it's going to be OpEx and not CapEx, right? And I think that same paradigm shift is occurring as we speak in ad tech, right? Where what used to take 30, 50, 20 millions of dollars to get a product up and running, you can now build fully featured products for ordinarily less, 2 orders of magnitude less. And when you can do that, you just fundamentally change the openness of the market and the amount of innovation that occurs rapidly. And I think that's happening as we speak.
To add on to that, when I became an investor about 6 years ago, we would still have companies raising money and building server farms and racks and physical infrastructure. And over a few years, things like Amazon Web Services in the cloud, it came to the point where I would ask startups, why aren't you looking at Amazon Web Services if you're not already? And I actually think that could eventually be what happens in the ad tech space. Like, why are you looking to build this stuff? Why don't you plug into the AppNexus platform?
That's great. So, in theory, if you're starting a company in this space, you should build it on AppNexus. Chris Fralic says so. That's what I heard.
Noted.
Noted. Good, good.
Should consider it.
Yes.
Tell me why you're not thinking about it.
Good. I like that. So what are you seeing now? So I claim there's not that much new innovation coming out of the ad tech space right now in the early stages. What are you guys seeing? Or what are you not seeing?
I think you're a great representation of innovation happening around real-time and platform and display. You're extending it into video. I think we're seeing a lot with mobile. We're seeing a lot with social. I think we're seeing a lot of innovation. It hasn't slowed down. It surprised me that it hasn't slowed down. So
no slowdown.
Well, I think listen, what I always loved about your vision and the team was it was a big play, right? Win, lose, or draw, it was a big play. And I think the challenge for all of us in ad tech is I would say there are a lot of incrementally interesting plays, right? I'm going to wave a magic wand over this inventory and turn it into 8 cent to 12 cent CPM, and I'll make a rent along the way. Okay, great business. Is that a huge venture returning company? I don't know the answer, right? So I think that's the persistent challenge, regardless of the underlying platform. I would say, though, that if you are attacking that little idea that I just supposed with 200 grand of capital versus 20 million, its return characteristics change dramatically, right? So I think I look in the next wave, real time is going to have just models that couldn't exist before real time, right? Then you've got a whole set of models where it's actually the old model, but where somebody spent $50 million to build it, you're going out with 500,000, right? And then the third is, I don't know. I think, venture guys, we learned long ago, intellectual capital is a scarce asset in the system. We rely on folks like you to come up with great innovations.
And to go back to Jeff Bezos of Amazon talking about why he built their cloud infrastructure, he called a lot of the work that they had to do undifferentiated heavy lifting. And if you can offload some of that to a platform and really focus on what's the core insight, what's the key thesis behind your idea and potentially your company, and test that cheaper and faster, that's what's important.
So for all of the folks out here, many of these guys are building or have been operating later stage companies, very successful. What should they be looking over their shoulder for? What are they not seeing that they should from your perspective?
Boy, at high level, I think, and I started one of these way back when, right, where early on, a lot of your competitive advantage was effectively proprietary access to supply. And at highest level, access to supply is democratizing rapidly, right? You guys are the instantiation of that, right? And so I think that's a fundamental challenge to a lot of traditional models. I think the upside, though, is it allows you, for years, when you started a company in the space, you always had this classic dilemma of, am I a tech provider or am I a network? Do I build supply and demand? How do I actually attack the market? And building any two-sided model is just hard because you got 12 guys in a room trying to do two things at once. So fundamentally, if you can abstract away from one side and focus on the other, it's just easier. So I think that's a huge advantage going forward for new companies.
I don't have the answer, but I would say that content and ads merging or becoming more like each other is a big deal. And when you think of platforms like Facebook and Twitter, and if I had a nickel for every time someone says Pinterest, that'd be a great return. And the time spent on these platforms is amazing, and yet it doesn't really plug into the normal way that ads are bought and sold. And so I think that's figuring out what all that means and how it all comes together is a big thing to keep an eye on.
That's great. Well, hey, thank you guys so much for your support. We'll be announcing more details about how the venture partners will be involved in AppNexus Accelerate. We'll probably do our first round of evals sometime in the summer. Is that right?
Yes.
So more coming, and looking forward to more great results from our partnership with our great investors. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks a lot.